The detention facility floated silently in the void of space, its cold metal walls reflecting the distant stars. Inside one of its interrogation chambers, Vextal sat chained to a chair designed for beings much larger than humans. His gray skin bore the scars of battle, and one of his forearms hung limp and useless. His large black eyes stared at the three humans who stood before him, trying to understand how his mighty empire had fallen to such small, fragile creatures. Kim Dae-ho entered the room first, his military uniform crisp and clean. He was not a large man by human standards, but he carried himself with a quiet authority that made Vextal uneasy. Behind him came Park Ji-woo, a younger woman with kind eyes who carried a translation device. Last was Commander Yoon Hana, a stern-faced woman whose cold gaze seemed to pierce through Vextal's very soul. "My name is Kim Dae-ho," the man said, his voice calm and measured. "This is Park Ji-woo. She will help us understand each other. And this is Commander Yoon Hana. We are here to learn what happened at Helios Ridge." Park Ji-woo activated her device, and Vextal heard the words in his own language, flowing through his mind like water. He had expected torture, pain, perhaps even death. But these humans simply wanted to talk. This confused him more than anything else they had done. "Why do you care?" Vextal asked, his voice rough and broken. "You won. Your kind destroyed my fleet. You killed my brothers and sisters. What more do you want from me?" Kim Dae-ho pulled out a chair and sat down across from the alien prisoner. His movements were slow and deliberate, showing no fear or aggression. "We want the galaxy to understand what happened. We want to prevent this from happening again. Your empire attacked us without warning, without reason. Thousands of humans died. But we don't seek revenge against you personally. We seek understanding." Vextal's head tendrils twitched in what his species considered a gesture of disbelief. In all his years as a scout commander for the Krillian Empire, he had never encountered such thinking. When his people won battles, they took what they wanted and destroyed what remained. They did not sit down with survivors and ask questions. "You want understanding," Vextal said, a bitter sound emerging from his throat that might have been laughter. "Then I will tell you. I will tell you how my people made the greatest mistake in our history. I will tell you why your species terrifies me more now than when you were killing my soldiers." Commander Yoon Hana stepped forward, her expression unchanged. "Begin at the start. Tell us why the Krillian Empire decided to attack human colonies." Vextal closed his eyes, and his mind drifted back to the council chambers on his homeworld, 3 months before the battle that ended everything. He had stood among dozens of other scout commanders, all gathered before the High Command. The chamber was grand and beautiful, filled with the spoils of 100 conquered worlds. The Krillian Empire had been expanding for centuries, taking what it wanted from species too weak to resist. They were proud, powerful, and convinced of their superiority over all other forms of life. "I was one of many scouts sent to observe humanity," Vextal began, opening his eyes to look at his captors. "For 20 years we watched your colonies. We studied your ships, your technology, your culture. We saw creatures with soft skin. No natural weapons, no claws or fangs or armor. You seemed so weak, so vulnerable. Your bodies could be broken easily. Your lifespans were short. You needed artificial environments to survive in most worlds." Park Ji-woo translated his words carefully, and Vextal saw something flicker across Kim Dae-ho's face. Not anger, but something else. Sadness, perhaps. "We sent reports back to the High Command," Vextal continued. "We told them that humans were technologically advanced but physically inferior. We noted that your military forces were small compared to the Krillian legions. We observed that you seemed to prefer trade and diplomacy over conquest. To our commanders, this meant you were weak, prey animals playing at civilization. And so they decided to attack," Commander Yoon Hana said, her voice flat and emotionless. "Yes," Vextal replied. "The High Command chose Helios Ridge as the first target. Intelligence reports said it was a mining colony with minimal defenses. A few thousand humans, mostly civilians with a small security force. They expected us to take the colony in less than a day. They expected your government to surrender within a week once they saw our power." Kim Dae-ho leaned forward, his dark eyes focused intently on Vextal. "But that's not what happened." "No," Vextal said quietly. "That is not what happened at all." He remembered the confidence of Admiral Zithron as the Krillian fleet dropped out of hyperspace above Helios Ridge. 50 warships, thousands of soldiers, enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. They had broadcast their demands for surrender. expecting immediate compliance or panicked resistance. Instead, they received silence for exactly 30 seconds. Then the humans responded. "I was on the command carrier when the first defense grid activated," Vextal said, his voice growing distant as he relived the memory. "We didn't even know it was there. Our scans had shown nothing. But suddenly, orbital platforms emerged from hiding and they began firing, not wild, panicked shots. Precise, calculated strikes. They hit our shield generators first, then our communication arrays, then our weapon systems. In less than 2 minutes, we had lost 3 ships. Park Ji-woo's translation device hummed softly as she worked. But Vextal noticed that all 3 humans remained perfectly still, listening with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Admiral Zithran ordered the ground assault immediately. He was angry, embarrassed that such a small force had damaged his fleet. 12,000 Krillian soldiers descended to the colony surface. They expected frightened civilians and a handful of security guards. "They found something else," Kim Dae-ho said. "They found hell," Vextal replied. "They found a human named Lee Jae-won and his warriors. Only 300 human soldiers, but they fought like demons. They had turned the entire colony into a trap. Buildings that looked empty were filled with ambush points. Mining equipment had been converted into weapons. The very ground beneath our feet was laced with explosives." Vextal's damaged arm twitched involuntarily as he remembered. But the worst part was not the traps or the weapons. It was the humans themselves. When we wounded them, they did not retreat. When we cornered them, they did not surrender. They fought with a ferocity we had never encountered. I saw one human soldier, bleeding from multiple wounds, destroy an entire Krillian squad before finally falling. And even as he died, he was smiling. Commander Yoon Hana's expression softened slightly, though her voice remained firm. "You began to realize you had made a terrible mistake." "Not yet," Vextal admitted. "Not until Admiral Cho Tae-sung arrived with your fleet. That was when I truly understood what we had done. That was when I learned to fear humanity." Kim Dae-ho stood slowly, his chair scraping against the metal floor. "We'll continue this tomorrow. You need rest and we need time to process what you've told us." As the 3 humans prepared to leave, Vextal spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why do you treat me with such kindness? I came to conquer your people. I helped plan the attack that killed thousands of humans. Why do you give me food, medical care, and patience?" Kim Dae-ho paused at the door and looked back at the alien prisoner. "Because that's what separates us from those who would harm others without cause. We have the strength to destroy you, Vextal, but we also have the wisdom to show mercy. Perhaps that is something your empire never learned." The door closed, leaving Vextal alone in the quiet chamber, contemplating the strange, terrifying species that had defeated his people. The next morning, Vextal found himself back in the interrogation chamber. The humans had given him a meal that morning, food carefully prepared to match his species' dietary needs. This small act of consideration continued to puzzle him. In Krillian prisons, captives received minimal nutrition and nothing more. Yet these humans fed him well and ensured his broken arm was properly treated. Kim Dae-ho entered with Park Ji-woo and Commander Yoon Hana, carrying what appeared to be a data pad. He placed it on the table between them but did not activate it yet. "Today we want you to tell us about the assault itself," Kim Dae-ho said. "Every detail you can remember. The galaxy needs to understand what happened, and only you can provide the Krillian perspective." Vextal shifted in his restraints. "Very well. I will tell you about the day your species showed us the meaning of true warfare." He closed his eyes and let his mind return to that terrible day. The Krillian fleet had positioned itself in high orbit above Helios Ridge, confident and ready. Admiral Zithran had been pleased with himself, already composing the victory message he would send back to the homeworld. "We expected your colony to be like others we had conquered," Vextal began. "Simple structures, basic defenses, frightened people. When our initial bombardment was met with those hidden defense platforms, Admiral Zithran became furious. He saw it as a personal insult that humans would dare resist the Krillian Empire." Park Ji-woo translated smoothly, and Vextal noticed that Commander Yoon Hana was taking detailed notes. The Admiral ordered an immediate ground invasion. He wanted to punish your people for their defiance. 12,000 of our finest warriors boarded assault craft and descended to the surface. I was among them, commanding a unit of 200 soldiers. We were elite scouts trained to move fast and strike hard. The memory of the descent was still vivid in Vextal's mind. The assault craft breaking through the atmosphere, the surface of Helios Ridge growing closer, the absolute certainty that this would be an easy victory. We landed in what your people call the industrial sector. Large warehouses, mining equipment, processing facilities. Our sensors showed minimal life signs, perhaps 50 humans in the entire area. We moved in standard formation, expecting either ambush or surrender. Kim Dae-ho leaned forward slightly. What did you find instead? Nothing, Vextel said. For the first 10 minutes, we found absolutely nothing. Empty buildings, abandoned equipment, not a single human. It made us nervous. Then the first explosion hit. He remembered the blast, the way it had torn through the front ranks of his unit. Not a random explosion, but a carefully placed trap that had been triggered at the perfect moment to cause maximum damage. Within seconds, the entire area erupted. Explosives hidden in walls, floors, even in equipment we thought was broken and useless. We lost 50 soldiers in the first minute, but that was just the beginning. Vextel opened his eyes and looked at the 3 humans. Then we met him. Lee Jae-won, one of your sergeants. He appeared on the roof of a warehouse with only 30 soldiers behind him. Just 31 humans against my remaining force of 150 Krillians. Admiral Zithron was watching from orbit and he laughed. He actually laughed at such a small force daring to challenge us. But Sergeant Lee had no intention of challenging you in the way you expected, Commander Yoon-hana said. No, Vextal agreed. He was not interested in honor combat or traditional warfare. He was interested in killing us as efficiently as possible. His soldiers opened fire from elevated positions, using the terrain to their advantage. When we returned fire, they vanished into the buildings. We pursued them, which was exactly what they wanted. The chase through the industrial sector had been a nightmare. Every corner held a potential ambush. Every door could be trapped. The humans moved through the colony like they had built it themselves, which Vextal later learned they had. We were hunters who had become the hunted, Vextal said quietly. Your soldiers turned our strengths into weaknesses. We were larger and stronger, but that made us easier targets. We had superior numbers, but in the tight corridors and narrow spaces, we could not use them effectively. We had better armor, but your weapons seemed to find every weak point. He remembered calling for air support only to learn that the situation in orbit had become even worse. The hidden defense platforms were not automated systems as Admiral Zythron had assumed. They were controlled by someone with tactical genius. A human named Dr. Shin Mina was running your defense grid, Vextal continued. We learned her name later from intercepted communications. She was supposed to be a colonial science director, not a military officer, but she commanded those platforms like a seasoned admiral. She predicted every move our fleet made. When our ships tried to destroy the platforms, she had already repositioned them. When we attempted to jam her signals, she switched to backup systems we didn't know existed. Kim Dae-ho activated his data pad, and a holographic image appeared above it showing the orbital battle. Vextal recognized it immediately as recordings from Krillian ships. Your people kept excellent records, Kim Dae-ho said. We recovered these from the wreckage. Vextal watched the playback with mixed feelings of shame and terror. On the screen, the Krillian fleet moved in standard attack formations, trying to position themselves for maximum firepower. But Dr. Shin Mina's defense platforms danced between them like predatory fish, striking and retreating, never staying in one place long enough to be destroyed. She was buying time, Vextal realized aloud. She knew reinforcements were coming. Yes, Commander Yoon-hana confirmed. Admiral Cho Tae-sung was already en route with the 3rd Fleet. Dr. Shin only needed to hold out for 6 hours. 6 hours that had felt like 6 days to Vextal and his soldiers on the ground. Sergeant Lee Jae-won's forces had continued to harass them, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. The Krillian casualties mounted steadily. What had started as an invasion force of 12,000 had been reduced to less than 8,000 within 3 hours. We called for reinforcements from the orbital fleet, Vextal said. Admiral Zithron sent down another 5,000 soldiers. 17,000 Krillian warriors against perhaps 300 human defenders. The Admiral was certain that sheer numbers would overwhelm you. Park Ji-woo adjusted her translation device as Vextal continued. But your Sergeant Lee did something unexpected. He broadcast a message on all frequencies, speaking in our language. He told us exactly where he was positioned. He invited us to attack. It was clearly a trap. But Admiral Zithron ordered the assault anyway. He was convinced that no trap could stop 17,000 soldiers. The memory of that assault made Vextal's hands tremble. The Krillian forces had converged on the central plaza, where Sergeant Lee had positioned his remaining troops. It looked like a perfect killing ground for the Krillian army. They had surrounded the human position with overwhelming force. Then the ground beneath us exploded, Vextal said, his voice hollow. Your sergeant had spent weeks rigging the entire plaza with mining charges. Thousands of tons of explosives buried beneath the surface. When they detonated, 3,000 of our soldiers died instantly. The rest of us were thrown into chaos. In that moment of confusion and terror, Sergeant Lee's forces had struck, not from their supposed position in the plaza, but from the surrounding buildings. They had never intended to defend the plaza. It had been nothing but bait. That was when I truly understood, Vextal said. Humans do not fight with honor or tradition. You fight to win using any method necessary. You study your enemy, learn their weaknesses, and exploit them without mercy. Kim Dae-ho's expression remained neutral, but there was something in his eyes that Vextal recognized. Pride perhaps, but also a hint of sadness. War is not a game, Vextal, Kim Dae-ho said softly. When someone attacks our homes, our families, our people, we respond with everything we have. Sergeant Lee and his soldiers were defending their colony, their friends, their way of life. They fought smart because they had to. And then your admiral arrived, Vextal said, his voice barely above a whisper. Admiral Cho Tae-sung and the Third Fleet dropped out of hyperspace exactly 6 hours after the battle began. I was still on the surface trying to reorganize what remained of my unit. I heard Admiral Zithron's final transmission before his ship was destroyed. The holographic display changed, showing the arrival of the human fleet. Vextal watched as sleek human warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. There were fewer ships than the Krillian fleet had, but something about the way they moved made Vextal's blood run cold. They did not hail us or offer terms of surrender, Vextal said. They simply began their attack. And in that moment I realized that everything we had faced so far had been a delay tactic. Dr. Shin Mina, Sergeant Lee Jae-won, all the traps and ambushes, they were just buying time for the real human military to arrive. Commander Yoon Hana stood and walked to the holographic display, studying it carefully. What happened next changed the balance of power in this entire sector of space. Your empire learned that humanity is not prey to be hunted. We are hunters ourselves, and we have spent millions of years perfecting the art. Vextal nodded slowly, feeling the weight of those words. Tomorrow, I will tell you about the battle in orbit. On the third day, Vextal noticed that Kim Dae-ho looked tired. There were dark circles under the human's eyes, suggesting he had not slept well. Yet he still came to the interrogation chamber with the same calm demeanor, accompanied by Park Ji-woo and Commander Yoon Hana. Are you well? Vextal asked, surprising himself with the question. Why should he care about the well-being of his captor? Kim Dae-ho offered a small smile. I've been reviewing the battle records all night. What your people encountered at Helios Ridge was not our full military doctrine. It was actually a relatively minor defensive operation. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Please, tell us about Admiral Cho Tae-sung's arrival. Vextal shifted in his seat, his injured arm aching despite the medical treatment. When the Third Fleet arrived, I was still on the colony surface with what remained of my unit. We had taken shelter in a damaged warehouse, trying to treat our wounded and re-establish communication with the orbital fleet. Through the broken windows, we could see the sky above us light up with weapons fire. The memory was burned into his mind. The beautiful, terrible dance of ships in combat. The flashes of energy weapons. The brief flares as vessels exploded. Admiral Zithron attempted to hail the human fleet, to propose honorable combat according to Galactic Coalition rules, Vextal continued. Your Admiral Cho responded with a single message. You attacked our colony without warning or declaration. You killed our civilians. There will be no honor today, only justice. Park Ji-woo's translation device hummed softly as she worked, and Vextal saw Commander Yoon Hana nod slowly, as if she approved of Admiral Cho's words. The human fleet did not engage in traditional formation combat, Vextal said. Instead, they split into smaller groups and began moving in patterns I had never seen before. It was like watching a pack of predators circling their prey. Each group moved independently, yet they were clearly coordinated. When one group attacked, another would be positioning for the next strike. He remembered Admiral Zithron's confused orders, trying to adapt to this strange new form of warfare. The Krillian fleet had been trained in the standard Galactic Coalition method. Large capital ships forming battle lines, trading fire until one side broke formation. But the humans refused to play by those rules. A human pilot named Kang Soo-ji led a squadron of small fighters. Vextal said, I learned her name from intercepted communications. She and her pilots did something that should have been impossible. They flew into the debris field created by our destroyed ships and used it as cover. Kim Dae-ho activated his datapad again, showing a recording of the fighter battle. Vextal watched as small agile human craft darted between pieces of wreckage, appearing and disappearing like insects among tall grass. Our point defense systems could not track them, Vextal admitted. They moved too fast, too unpredictably, and when they attacked, they struck at our weakest points. Engine assemblies, shield generators, life support systems. Lieutenant Kang's squadron disabled 3 of our cruisers in the first 15 minutes. But the fighter pilots were not the worst of what humanity had brought to the battle. That distinction belonged to the human special operations teams. While we were focused on the fleet battle, your soldiers were boarding our ships, Vextal said, his voice growing quiet. We did not even know they were there until it was too late. A human named Choi Min-ho led one of these teams. They infiltrated our command carrier, Admiral Zetheron's flagship. The horror of that discovery had spread through the Krillian forces like a plague. How had humans breached their most heavily defended vessel? How had they moved through the ship without being detected? Choi Min-ho and his team were like ghosts, Vextal continued. They sabotaged our navigation systems, cut our internal communications, and eliminated key personnel. But the worst part was the psychological warfare. They left messages for us to find, images of destroyed Krillian ships, recordings of our soldiers' final moments. They wanted us to know that we were being hunted inside our own vessels. Commander Yoon Hana's expression remained neutral, but Vextal thought he saw a flicker of something in her eyes, not pride or satisfaction, but perhaps a grim understanding of necessity. The Krillian soldiers began to panic, Vextal said. We had trained for fleet combat, for ground assaults, for siege warfare. But we had never trained for an enemy that could be anywhere, could strike from any direction, and showed no fear of death. Your special operations teams moved through our ships like predators, and we were their prey. He remembered the reports flooding in from other Krillian vessels, teams of 2 or 3 humans taking down entire security squads, soldiers vanishing from their posts only to be found later with their throats cut. Equipment failures that seemed random but were clearly sabotage. Admiral Zetheron tried to rally his forces, Vextal said. He broadcast messages of courage and honor, reminding us that we were the mighty Krillian Empire. But his words rang hollow when we could hear explosions echoing through our own ships, when we could see our fleet being torn apart by an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. Kim Dae-ho leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. What you experienced was humanity's approach to warfare. We don't believe in giving our enemies a fair fight. We believe in overwhelming them with every advantage we can create. But it was more than just tactics and technology, Vextal said, his head tendrils twitching with agitation. It was the way your soldiers worked together. Every human unit, from individual soldiers to massive warships, operated as parts of a single organism. When Lieutenant Kang's fighters spotted a weakness in our formation, that information reached Admiral Cho within seconds. When Choi Min-ho's team sabotaged a ship's shields, your capital ships knew exactly where to strike. Park Ji-woo nodded as she translated. We call it networked warfare. Every human soldier is connected through our combat network, sharing information in real time. What one sees, all see. What one learns, all learn. The concept had been incomprehensible to Vextal during the battle, but now he understood it. The humans fought not as individuals or even as separate units, but as a single coordinated force. It gave them an advantage that no amount of courage or superior numbers could overcome. The battle lasted 1 hour and 43 minutes. Vextal said, at the end, 37 of our 50 ships had been destroyed. The remaining 13 were crippled and unable to fight. Your third fleet suffered damage to only 5 vessels with no ships lost. He paused, remembering the moment when Admiral Zetheron's flagship exploded. The commander who had been so confident, so certain of easy victory, had died without ever truly understanding what he faced. On the surface, those of us who remained alive received orders to evacuate, Vextal continued, but there were no ships left to retrieve us. Sergeant Lee Jae-won's forces had us surrounded, and we knew that fighting further would only lead to death. We surrendered. The word tasted bitter in Vextal's mouth. The Krillian Empire did not surrender. They conquered or they died. But faced with the reality of humanity's power, the survivors had chosen life over pride. I expected execution, Vextal said honestly. In Krillian culture, defeated warriors are either enslaved or killed. We show no mercy to those we conquer, and we expect none in return. But your Sergeant Lee did something I still do not fully understand. He offered us medical treatment and safe imprisonment. Kim Dae-ho's tired eyes met Vextal's gaze. We fight with overwhelming force when necessary, but we do not kill those who surrender. That is the difference between humans and those who see war as simple conquest. Vextal thought about the human soldiers who had tended to his wounds after the battle. They had been efficient but not cruel, professional but not cold. They had treated him and his fellow survivors with the same care they gave their own wounded. But there is more to tell, Vextal said. After the surface battle ended, I was placed in an escape pod with other wounded Krillians. We were supposed to be picked up by rescue ships, but none came. The escape pod drifted through the debris field for 2 days. Our supplies ran low. Our injured died one by one. I thought we would all perish there, forgotten among the wreckage of our failed invasion. Commander Yoon Hana checked her notes. But you were rescued. Yes, Vextal said quietly. By humans. A recovery team led by a captain named Baek Ji-ho found us. They brought us aboard their ship, gave us food and water, treated our wounds. I could not understand why. We were their enemies. We had killed their people, yet they saved us. Kim Dae-ho stood and walked to the window of the interrogation chamber, looking out at the stars beyond. Tomorrow you will tell us about that rescue and what you learned about humanity afterward. For now, rest. You've given us much to consider. As the 3 humans prepared to leave, Vextal called out, Commander Kim, may I ask you something? Of course. If another species attacks your colonies, will you respond the same way? Kim Dae-ho turned back, his expression serious. We hope there will never be another attack. But if someone threatens human lives without cause, yes, we will respond with everything we have. We do not seek war, Vextal, but we will always defend ourselves and those we care for. That is not a threat. It is simply the truth. The door closed. The 4th day brought a change in the routine. Instead of meeting in the interrogation chamber, Vextal was escorted to a different room. This one had large windows showing the stars outside, and the furniture was more comfortable. There were even plants growing in containers along the walls, something Vextal found oddly soothing. Kim Dae-ho, Park Ji-woo, and Commander Yoon Hana were already there, along with a new face appearing as a hologram. The projection showed a middle-aged human woman with kind eyes and graying hair. This is Han Seo-jun, Kim Dae-ho introduced. She is a diplomatic envoy who helped negotiate the terms of peace after the battle. She wanted to speak with you today. Vextal studied the hologram carefully. Han Seo-jun smiled at him. A gesture he had learned meant friendliness among humans. Hello, Vextal, she said through Park Ji-woo's translation device. I hope you are being treated well. I am, Vextal replied, still confused by the human concern for his welfare. Your people have shown me more kindness than I deserve. Han Seo-jun's expression grew serious. You were a soldier following orders. While we cannot excuse the attack on our colony, we understand that you personally were not responsible for your empire's decision to start this war. Now I believe you were about to tell us about your rescue. Vextal settled into his chair, grateful that his restraints had been removed days ago. The humans trusted him not to attack them, another strange choice that spoke to their confidence. After 2 days drifting in the escape pod, our supplies were gone, Vextal began. 3 of the 5 Krillians with me had died from their injuries. The other survivor and I were weak, barely conscious. I had accepted that we would die there among the debris of our fleet. He remembered the cold darkness of space, the silence broken only by the weak breathing of his companion. Death had seemed inevitable, almost welcome after everything they had experienced. Then we detected a ship approaching, Vextal continued. My first thought was that it was a Krillian rescue vessel, but the signature was wrong. It was human. I tried to prepare myself for whatever they would do to us. In my culture, enemies found helpless after battle are usually killed quickly. It is considered more merciful than letting them suffer. The memory of what happened next still amazed him. The human ship had approached carefully, and a voice had come over the communication system. A male voice, calm and professional. This is Captain Baek Ji-ho of the recovery vessel Mercy's Hand. We are here to help you. Please do not be afraid. I thought it was a trick, Vextal admitted. Some kind of psychological torture before they killed us. But they opened our escape pod and brought us aboard their ship. The captain himself was there along with medical personnel. They immediately began treating our injuries. Commander Yoon Hana made a note on her datapad. Captain Bayek is one of our most experienced rescue operations officers. He has saved hundreds of beings, both human and alien, from dying in space. Vextal looked at her with confusion. But why? Why save your enemies? Han Seo-jun's hologram moved slightly, drawing his attention. Because that is who we are, Vextal. Yes, we can be fierce warriors when we must defend ourselves. But we are also capable of compassion, even for those who have wronged us. These two aspects of humanity are not contradictory. They are both essential parts of our nature. The concept was difficult for Vextal to grasp. In Krillian society, strength and mercy were seen as opposites. The strong dominated the weak. Showing mercy was considered weakness, but humans seemed to believe that true strength included knowing when to show compassion. Captain Bayek's crew gave us food that was safe for our biology, Vextal said. They treated our wounds with the same care they would give their own soldiers. They even provided entertainment to help pass the time during our transport to this facility. I watched human video recordings trying to understand your culture. One recording had particularly fascinated him. It showed a human family caring for an injured animal they had found. The animal was not food, not a work beast, just a wild creature that needed help. The humans had spent time and resources nursing it back to health, then released it back into nature. Why would humans care for a simple animal? Vextal asked. What benefit does it provide? Kim Dae-ho smiled slightly. Not everything we do is about benefit or advantage. Sometimes we help others simply because it is right. That animal was suffering, and we had the power to end that suffering, so we did. This philosophy extended to how the humans had treated all the Krillian prisoners, not just Vextal. He had learned through conversations with his guards that over 3,000 Krillian soldiers had survived the battle and subsequent surrender. All of them were being held in facilities like this one, receiving medical care, adequate food, and humane treatment. During my time on Captain Bayek's ship, I met another human, Vextal said. A historian named Nethkor. He paused. No, that is wrong. Nethkor was not human. He was from my own species. This revelation had shocked him. A Krillian working willingly with humans, not as a slave, but as a colleague. Nethkor had been studying humanity for decades, Vextal continued. He had left the Krillian Empire years ago, disagreeing with our aggressive expansion policies. He told me things about your species that I had never known, things that explained everything I had witnessed. Park Ji-woo adjusted her translation device, and Vextal noticed that all the humans in the room were listening intently. He told me about Earth, your homeworld, Vextal said, a planet that should not have produced sentient life. Too much gravity, too many predators, too unstable, but somehow humans survived there. You evolved as what Nethkor called persistence hunters. The concept had been alien to Vextal at first. The Krillians were ambush predators, using superior strength and numbers to overwhelm their prey quickly, but humans had developed a different strategy. Nethkor explained that ancient humans would chase their prey for days, sometimes weeks. Vextal said, you could not run as fast as your prey, but you could run longer. You would follow animals until they collapsed from exhaustion, then take them. This is why humans have such incredible endurance. It is why you do not give up even when wounded or outnumbered. Han Seo-jun's hologram nodded. Our evolutionary history shaped not just our bodies, but our minds and our culture. We learned to work together in groups, to communicate complex ideas, to adapt to changing circumstances. These same traits that helped us survive on Earth now serve us in space. But there is more, Vextal said. Nethkor also told me about human pack behavior. You form strong social bonds with your groups. You will sacrifice yourselves to protect your pack members. This is why your soldiers fight so fiercely. They are not just defending territory or resources. They are defending their family, their pack. He thought about Sergeant Lee Jae-won and his 300 defenders. They had held out against overwhelming odds, not because of orders or duty, but because they were defending their home and their people. That emotional connection had made them more dangerous than any amount of training or equipment alone could have. Nethkor showed me something else, Vextal continued. Historical records of human wars. You have fought each other for thousands of years, developing strategies and technologies that we Krillians never imagined. By the time you reached the stars, you had already perfected the art of warfare through millennia of conflict. This was perhaps the most terrifying revelation of all. The Krillian Empire had been expanding through space for only a few centuries, encountering species that had limited experience with large-scale warfare. But humans had been refining their combat abilities for thousands of years before they ever left their homeworld. The war with your own kind taught you things that other species never learned, Vextal said. You learned that victory goes not to the strongest but to the most adaptable. You learned that information is as valuable as firepower. You learned that mercy can be as powerful as violence. Kim Dae-ho stood and walked to the window looking out at the stars. We learned many hard lessons through our history. We learned that war brings only suffering, that conquest leads to resentment, that true security comes from cooperation rather than domination. These lessons cost us dearly, but they made us who we are today. When the Krillian Empire attacked Helios Ridge, you were not just fighting a colony, Vextal said slowly, understanding finally dawning. You were facing a species that had spent its entire existence learning how to survive against impossible odds. We never had a chance, did we? Commander Yoon Hana turned to face him. If your empire had approached us peacefully, offering trade and friendship, you would have found willing partners. But you chose to attack us without provocation, to kill our civilians, to threaten our way of life. You activated every defensive instinct that evolution gave us. You turned us from potential friends into committed enemies. And yet even now you show me kindness, Vextal said. Even after everything my people did, you treat me with respect and dignity. You feed me, heal me, and listen to my story. This duality terrifies me more than your weapons or your warriors. Han Seojun's hologram smiled sadly. That is because you now understand the truth about humanity. We are capable of great violence when threatened, but we prefer peace and cooperation. We can be your worst enemy or your best friend. The fifth day arrived with a sense of finality. Vextal woke early in his quarters, which had been upgraded from a cell to a modest but comfortable room. He looked at himself in the mirror, seeing how much he had changed in just these few days. His wounds were healing well thanks to human medical care, but the changes went deeper than physical healing. Kim Dae-ho arrived without the others, carrying a set of clean clothing appropriate for Vextal's species. Today is important, the human said quietly. Your testimony will be broadcast to every member species of the Galactic Coalition. Billions of beings will hear your words. Are you ready? Vextal took the clothing with his good hand, his damaged arm now functional enough to help dress himself. I am ready. The galaxy must know the truth about what happened. They must understand what humanity truly is so that no other species makes the mistake my empire made. An hour later, Vextal found himself in a massive chamber filled with representatives from dozens of alien species. Holographic projections showed thousands more attending remotely. At the center of the room stood a raised platform where Vextal would give his testimony. Nearby, he saw Kim Dae-ho, Park Ji-woo, and Commander Yoon Hana taking their seats among other human representatives. The Galactic Coalition Arbiter, a towering being from an ancient species called the Session to Order. We are here to understand the events at Helios Ridge and the subsequent conflict between the Krillian Empire and humanity. Vextal, former commander of the Krillian Scout Forces, will provide his account. Let all present listen with open minds. Vextal climbed onto the platform, his legs shaking slightly. He had faced enemy fire without fear, but speaking before the entire galaxy terrified him in a different way. He took a deep breath and began. My name is Vextal. I'm Krillian. 3 months ago, I was part of the force that attacked the human colony of Helios Ridge. I am here to tell you that this attack was the greatest mistake in my empire's history, and to warn you all never to repeat our error. He proceeded to recount everything, just as he had told Kim Dae-ho over the past 4 days. He described the Krillian arrogance, their assumptions about human weakness, the careful planning of the attack. He spoke of the hidden defenses, of Sergeant Lee Jae-won's brilliant tactics, of Dr. Shin Mina's orbital defense strategy. The chamber remained silent as Vextal described the arrival of Admiral Cho Tai-sung's fleet, the devastating efficiency of human warfare, the special operations teams that had turned Krillian ships into death traps. He explained about Lieutenant Kang Soo-ji's fighter squadron and Choi Min-ho's infiltration teams. But the most terrifying thing about humanity, Vextal said, his voice carrying through the vast chamber, is not their weapons or their tactics. It is their duality. They can be fierce warriors who show no mercy to active enemies, yet compassionate saviors who risk themselves to rescue defeated foes. He told them about Captain Baek Ji-ho's rescue operation, about the kindness shown to Krillian prisoners, about the medical care and humane treatment he had received. He spoke of the cultural historian who had explained humanity's evolutionary history, their nature as persistence hunters and pack animals. Humans do not fight like other species, Vextal continued. They have spent thousands of years perfecting warfare on their own world, before they ever reached the stars. They have studied the art of combat through countless conflicts with each other. When you attack humanity, you are not facing a species that learned warfare through conquest of weaker beings. You are facing a species that learned warfare through survival against impossible odds. A representative from the Krillian Empire, sent to observe the proceedings, shifted uncomfortably in their seat. Vextal met their gaze steadily. My empire attacked humanity because we saw them as weak, Vextal said. We were wrong. Humanity is not weak. They are simply choosing to be peaceful. There is a vast difference between cannot fight and will not fight. We learned this difference at a terrible cost. As Vextal concluded his testimony, a human stood up from the diplomatic section. It was a woman Vextal had not met before, but her bearing suggested high authority. Kim Daeho had mentioned her name earlier. Ambassador Song Hyarin, the senior human representative to the Galactic Coalition. If I may address the assembly, she said, her voice calm but carrying an unmistakable weight of authority. The arbiter nodded. The coalition recognizes Ambassador Song Hyarin of humanity. The ambassador walked to the center of the chamber, and all eyes turned to her. She was not particularly tall or imposing by human standards, but something about her presence commanded attention. The Galactic Coalition has heard Vextal's testimony about the events at Helios Ridge. Ambassador Song began. Now you must hear humanity's position on these events. We did not seek this conflict. We did not want war with the Krillian Empire or any other species. We came to the stars hoping to find friends, partners, fellow travelers in the vast cosmos. She paused, letting her words sink in. But we are not naive. We understand that the universe can be dangerous, that not all species share our values of cooperation and mutual respect. So we prepared. We built defenses. We trained our soldiers. We developed technologies that could protect our people if ever the need arose. A holographic display activated behind her, showing images from the Battle of Helios Ridge. The assembled representatives watched in silence as the human defense unfolded, seeing the tactical brilliance, the coordinated response, the overwhelming effectiveness of human military forces. The forces that defended Helios Ridge and defeated the Krillian assault fleet represented less than 2% of humanity's total military capacity, Ambassador Song said, and a ripple of shock ran through the chamber. We have colonies across 30 star systems, each with similar defenses. We have fleets positioned to respond to any threat within hours, and behind all of this stands Earth, our homeworld, protected by defensive systems that make Helios Ridge look simple by comparison. Vextal watched as another figure entered the chamber. This was a human male in military uniform, his chest covered with decorations that even Vextal could recognize as indicating high rank and extensive combat experience. Kim Daeho had mentioned this man as well, Grand Marshal An Dong-hyun, Supreme Commander of all human military forces. If I may add to Ambassador Song's remarks, the Grand Marshal said, his voice deep and commanding. The arbiter nodded permission. I want to be absolutely clear about humanity's military doctrine, Grand Marshal An said. We do not seek conquest. We do not desire to dominate other species. We have no interest in building an empire, but we will defend ourselves and our allies with every resource at our disposal. He gestured to the holographic display, which now showed the full extent of human military capabilities. Ships, weapons, defensive installations, all demonstrated with clear detail. This is not a threat, the Grand Marshal continued. It is a promise. Attack us and you will face the full might of humanity. But approach us in peace and you will find no more loyal friends in the galaxy. Trade with us and we will make you prosperous. Ally with us and we will stand beside you against any threat. The choice has always been yours to make. Ambassador Song stepped forward again. The Krillian Empire learned a hard lesson at Helios Ridge. They learned that humanity cannot be conquered, cannot be intimidated, cannot be forced to submit. But they also learned that humanity can forgive, can show mercy, can offer friendship even to former enemies. She turned to face the Krillian representative. Your empire has offered reparations for the attack, compensation for the families of those who died. and a formal treaty of non-aggression. We accept these offers. The war between our peoples is over. Now we begin the harder work of building trust and cooperation. The Krillian representative stood, their posture showing the submissive stance that their culture used to indicate respect and acknowledgement of superior status. The Krillian Empire acknowledges its error. We attacked humanity in arrogance and ignorance. We paid dearly for this mistake. We offer our formal apology and our commitment to peaceful relations going forward. The Arbiter raised one of their many limbs. The Coalition recognizes the resolution between the Krillian Empire and humanity. Now we must address the broader implications for the galaxy. What guidance can we offer to prevent future conflicts of this nature? Vextal was surprised when Ambassador Song gestured for him to speak again. He climbed back onto the platform, his heart racing. I ask the assembled species to learn from my experience, Vextal said. Do not mistake humanity's preference for peace as inability to wage war. Do not confuse their kindness with weakness. Do not assume that because they appear physically fragile, they are easy prey. Humanity is neither predator nor prey. They are something unique in the galaxy. A species that has mastered both the art of war and the art of peace. He paused, gathering his thoughts. If you meet humans, treat them with respect. Honor their boundaries. Value their friendship. Because I have seen what they become when threatened. And I have also experienced the generosity they show to those who no longer pose a danger. Both aspects are real. Both are powerful. And both should inspire you to choose cooperation over conflict. The Arbiter nodded slowly. The Coalition will take Vextal's testimony under advisement. Are there any other speakers?